Hello, Celestial. Hello, Charlotte. Hello, Karina. So we're going to get started. In getting started, I just would like to say hello to everyone who's joined us. And I would love for you to pop in the chat with letting us know where you're tuning in from today, just so we can get an idea of everyone that's here. And if you are one of our Hurston Wright Fellows from this summer, let us know. If you see one of your instructors up here, give them a shout out. And then we're going to get started. Oh, I see. Hello, Rhonda from Nashville. Hello, Portia. I think formerly from the DMV, but I think you're in Virginia right now, but you didn't ask me to tell all your business, but it's so good to see your name. Hey, Joy from Dallas, Georgia. Kamari from Costa Rica, yes. Jordan from Austin, Texas. Courtney from Upper Marlboro, Maryland, in my county, in Prince George's County. Corinna from Stamford, Connecticut. Teresa from Dallas, Texas. Ebony from Philly. Kaylin from Mississippi. And Kaylin says, hi, Dr. Love. And Celestial says, St. Mary's, Georgia. Monda was my instructor. All right. So we have Yusuf from Fort Worth. So hello, everybody. It's so wonderful to see all of these names and faces from all across the globe. We're so glad that you're here. Today, you are joining us for one of our virtual events that is taking place during what we call a Summer of Writing series. And it's part of our programming as we present throughout the summer our various Writers' Weeks. For many of you who this is a return to an event, you are familiar with my spiel where I talk about that we've already facilitated a Writers' Weekend, a virtual Writers' Weekend, where both of our panelists today were instructors. We also had a Writers' Week in Virginia at Virginia Tech University, as well as one at Rutgers University last month. And then we are going to begin on Monday, our final Summer Writers Workshop at Howard University. So we are so glad that you are here. So let's get started. We ask that today we're going to have a conversation, and we ask that you keep your mics muted throughout our conversation with our panelists. And there will be a time where you will be able to ask questions. And we ask that you pose the questions in the chat, which will allow us to get to as many questions as possible in respect of time. My name is Dr. Khadijah Ali-Coleman. I'm the Executive Director of the Hurston Wright Foundation, and I'm a multi-genre writer who is excited to engage our panel today in a conversation titled Writing While Black, the Social Responsibility of Being a Black Writer. Today's conversation was conceived when considering today's contemporary issues that span the gamut from police brutality, rising inflation and global wars, to a global health pandemic, immigration injustices, environmental climate crises, and an aging population. What is the social responsibility of being a Black writer in this world today? Ben Okri wrote in The Guardian in 2014 that, quote, we should not be expected to write about slavery, poverty, or racial injustice. The greatest literature comes not from the heaviest subjects, but from freedom of thought, end quote. In 1935, however, Langston Hughes wrote to Black writers the following advice, quote, write about the moon if you want to, go ahead, this is a free country. But there are certain very practical things American Negro writers can do and must do. There's a song that says, the time ain't long, and that song is right. Something has got to change in America and change soon, and we must help that change to come. So there are many ideas regarding this topic, and we're going to scratch the surface with our guests today. Joining us for this panel are poet Monifa Love and screenwriter Monda Raquel Webb. We're hoping Damaris, multi-genre writer Damaris Hill will join us soon. But Dr. Monifa Love is the Associate Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at Bowie State University. She also serves as a professor in the Department of Language, Literature, and Cultural Studies. Dr. Love graduated with honors from Princeton University, and she majored in anthropology, studied poetry with Galway Kinnell, and earned a certificate in Afro-American Studies. She received her doctorate with distinction from the Florida State University as a McKnight Doctoral Fellow and Associate of the great philosopher William R. Jones. Her work has been featured in national journals and magazines, encyclopedias, anthologies, and textbooks. Monda Raquel Webb is an author, poet, award-winning filmmaker, and performing artist. Monda was voted Filmmaker of the Year in 2020 by the National Black Movie Association and established Little Known Stories Production Company, LLC, as a production arm of Monda Media. In 2015, she wrote, directed, and produced her first short film, Zoo, which has won several United States and International Film Festival awards, including awards from Spain and Indonesia for Best Short Film, Best Script, Excellence Award, Best International Short, and other categories. In 2019, her second film, Pooch Sitter, hit the festival circuit in January and ended the year with 11 screenings. So I'd like to thank both of our guests for being here. And I want to just open up and begin our conversation with just the first question, because, you know, it can go anywhere. And I want to just throw something out there. So as the first Black woman to receive one of the Science Fiction Writers Award, the Damon Knight Grandmaster Award, Nalo Hopkinson says she takes joyful responsibility in her work. And she said, I know I represent a lot to people who didn't think they could do what I'm doing for various reasons. She said, people from marginalized experiences like I am, being Black, being an immigrant to North America, being female, being queer, being over a certain age, having some level of disability is something I do take seriously. I would like to ask you two if, when you consider your own work, are there groups of people you're representing? And if so, does this representation influence you when it comes to choosing what you write about?
Hi, Khadijah. I just wanted you to know Damaris has joined. I don't know if you wanted to do it.
Awesome. All right. Well, you all can get this started while I bring her to 4.
Okay. Monica, do you want to start? Or?
Please, Vonda.
Okay. So I saw an interview with Jordan Peele not long ago, and the reporter asked him if the work that he does is informed by his experiences growing up or his race. And he said, everything that I do is informed by race. So I think it's an excellent question, and it's definitely one that we can't ignore. And Khadijah, like you, I love quotes. So I did want to share a couple of quotes by some of my favorites throughout the century with regard to that. Tony K. Bambara said that as a culture worker who belongs to an oppressed people, my job is to make revolution irresistible. Nina Simone, and many of us are probably familiar with this, says you can't help it. An artist's duty, as far as I'm concerned, is to reflect the times. Ava DuVernay says that justice and storytelling really go hand in hand. And to end on one of my super faves, James Baldwin, he says that the role of an artist is exactly the same as the role of the lover. If I love you, I have to make you conscious of the things you don't see. And when I am struck by something, generally writers may write as a discipline, but I write because I'm impacted by something, because I've had a knee-jerk reaction to something. And when I did Zoo Volker Show, it was because I had no clue that human zoos existed and that they existed up until 1958. When I did Pooch Sitter, I was very concerned for the homeless and thought that at any moment now, any of us, our next door neighbors, that myself could be homeless, and that more attention needed to be brought to it, because it's not just what we think it is, right? And so most of the things that I do are informed by trying to protect, in a way, or uplift those who are voiceless, and those who are underrepresented, and those who are unseen. So I kind of feel like it's my job to make this population of people seen, which includes women. So it's very important to me.
So it sounds like it doesn't even have to be a group that you are part of, just as long as it's an issue or it's a group of people that you feel are voiceless, as you said.
That's correct.
Okay, awesome. I do want to, before Monifa, Dr. Love jumps in, I do want to acknowledge that Dr. Damaris Hill, I always like to say your name like that, Dr. Damaris Hill with a shoulder shrug has joined us. And I do want to just give a little background regarding her bio as to who she is. She also, like Dr. Love, Monda Raquel Webb, I can't say just part of your name, Monda, I gotta say the whole name. All three of these wonderful instructors were instructors during our Hurston Wright virtual weekend that was this past June. Damaris Hill is the author of Breath Better Spent, Living Black Girlhood, that was released this year. She's also author of A Bound Woman is a Dangerous Thing, The Incarceration of African-American Women, from Harriet Tubman to Sandra Bland. She is a 2020 NAACP Image Award finalist for Outstanding Literary Work. And she also is the Associate Professor of Creative Writing at the University of Kentucky. So welcome to the conversation, Damaris. And so I want to repeat for both you and Monifa the question, which was, when you consider your own work, are there groups of people you are representing? And if so, does this representation influence you when it comes to choosing what you write about?
Well, I'm waiting on Dr. Love to answer.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm mesmerized by the women in the room. So I would like to say that back in the earlies for me, I was studying with Kimiko Baraka, and she was talking about Black art based on color, consciousness, and culture. And at that time in my life, that seemed such a clear thing. It seemed so cut and dried. And for quite some time, I wrote from the position of that being clear. It's as I've gotten older that I understand that's really color, culture, and consciousness, complex matters. So for me, what I can understand consistently, because I think living is such a complex thing, and living as a Black female is like impossibly complex, but somehow we manage to do it with like amazing grace for sure, is that I seek to carry forth what I understand my ancestors presented me with. And I keep in mind generations to come. So it's not a dismissal of the present, but I find myself when I get lodged in the present, I get confused, or I get so hopping mad that I can hardly contain myself, or so depressed that I don't write at all. But if I think about myself being anchored, if I think about myself as a tree, anchored by my ancestors, and thereby infused with their power, and that if I'm reaching up not only to God, but the generations to come, I feel like everything else tends to take care of itself. An additional matter is because I studied with the brilliant William R. Jones, who was an oppression theorist, part of living and writing as Black means that I work to extinguish the oppressive nature I can bring into the world. When I judge people, when I take difference as something I need to be worried about, when I act in ways that are not, where I don't consider others as co-equals, or when I have little catty things to say about other writers, I have to work on that in myself. So trying to embrace extinguishing the oppressive tendencies in myself, and anchoring myself in my ancestors, and thinking about what world I want for our future, that's basically how I keep from going crazy.
Wow, and that's very heavy. That's a lot. That's multitasking to the infinite degree of having to cover all those bases. I do want to come back to your process, because it seems spiritual in some sense. And I do want to bring that into the conversation, but I would like Damaris to answer regarding who is this group that you're representing. I know in speaking with you earlier this year about your most recent book, you spoke at length in terms of this little girl voice with your most recent book. But when you think of your career, you think of your writing in general, is there a group or a message or an idea that you're representing that you hold fast to make it inherent in your work?
Well, I think I agree with everything that that my Monda and Monifa have said, and Dr. Love and Mona Raquel Wells, right?
Webb
Have said. But I think this answer is complex and layered because our lives are complex and layered. So one, not enough can be said about the lives of Black women, particularly in the context of 500, 600 years of white supremacy and colonialism and how it has impacted our lives. So not enough can be said about Black women. It doesn't mean it's the only identity or social placement that I think about or the only people that I think about. But if I'm choosing my time and my investments, that's one place where I would like to put them. Number two, there's not one way to be a Black woman. So my work, one book or two books or 18 books couldn't begin to encapsulate the totality of what it means to be a Black woman. But I am very passionate about Black women, the ways that we negotiate power and the ways that we show love. And I want everyone to have an opportunity to witness that. And I do think about that when I'm writing.
I appreciate you all's responses because they're so varied and speak to what you're just saying, Damaris, where we are not a monolith, right? We have these different experiences and we respond to our practice as writers very differently. I found in preparing for today's conversation, I read a number of articles and reflected on my own practice as a writer. But I came across an article, 2020 article, in essence, where filmmaker Casey Lemons, she said in an interview that as Black women creatives, quote, our responsibility is to not give up. Our responsibility is to maybe try harder than everybody else. Our responsibility is to persevere and to keep creating and from a place of honesty. So my question is, do you agree with this narrative of having to persevere and try harder in an industry that research has shown is inequitable for Black writers and women in particular?
I don't know if Black women actually have to. I wouldn't necessarily say try harder in the very obvious sense, but the entire experience of being a Black woman kind of prepares you to be a little different.
In what way?
You understand the world a little different. When I was studying with someone that's very important to me that may or may not be on this call, but she introduced me to Dr. Gwendolyn May Henderson. And she talks about the experiences of Black women in American culture being somewhat similar to a funhouse mirror because everything is binary. And the binary experience and the binary definition of what a Black woman is doesn't work in the American psychology. It's inept. It's inept, right? So the whole way that Black women exist in this space, before we even get to ideas of perseverance or surviving oppressions and challenges, the entire way that we exist is profoundly obscure to most.
Break it down.
because the way that white supremacy and patriarchy and gender oppression and capitalism work, the Black woman's experience is all but invisible and nearly invisible purposely, right? So the way that we show up is always different than that of our peers that might not share this intersectional identity, I think.
I would love for Monda and Monifa for you to jump in and thinking of my question, perhaps responding to what Damaris just said, because you're speaking to this otherness that's just inherent because of this difference. And so I'm curious, the reason why I brought up the quote and pulled that to kind of give context to this question is because this idea of perseverance and work, and that seems to be a really constant narrative when talking about Black women. We always got to work harder. You were the mule of the world, right? With everything, carrying everything. And so my question to you in 2022, is this still, Casey Lemon said this 2 years ago, but is this still the narrative that it should be inherent in this idea of social responsibility as Black writers?
Yeah, so I say yes, yes, and yes. I think that there is nothing new under the sun, and the things that were experienced 2 years ago, the same things that were experienced 200 years ago, they are just being reflected in different ways. And so we are manifesting and doing things in different ways, but it is still the same blank, right? And so when I think about the experiences of a Black woman recently turned 54, I'm looking more and more to my elders and my ancestors, and I look at the history that we haven't been told, and I'm absorbing what I'm learning on my own or through mentorship or through wonderful sisters like you all, and I say to myself, it's a wonder that we're still standing. But when you look at all of that Black pain, you come out on the other side and you have Black joy, because the joy to me is an overcomer for the pain. And to the thought of, keeping on moving, there, in my opinion, there is no choice, because it's what we do, right? And because if we give up, then the rest of the world gives up. It becomes a domino effect. And I just, they say heavy is the head that wears the crown. And I think there is a way to embrace that and carry, I don't even know if I would call it a burden, but being the responsible for us to be talented, to be able to share our thoughts through poetry and through novels and through deep thinking. That is a blessing that others are benefiting from. So we just have no choice, and we'll probably go until we die. And you're right, we're not doing it for ourselves, we're doing it for the generations to come.
For me, that quote is I don't know, it strikes me wrong in this sense. I'm in Beloved, there's a character Stamp Paid. So to me, after 400, 500 years, our lives should have been paid for like 20 billion times over. And so the notion that we must persevere, that we might not just want to sit in the middle of the street and weep or wail, or just, go sit at a beach, or, take other kind of measures. I'm just not sure that what we have been doing, we must keep doing. Mm. And I was totally respect that there's a baton that's been passed on and that we have a race to run. But I think when we get tired, that it expresses itself in anger and grief and violence or ill health. So I think while surely we have a collective mission to see what the end's going to be, I also think that we have to bestow grace on one another to be able to sit down and not feel guilty about it, that we bless our sisters especially and take up their load when they have to set it down. So the perseverance thing, is cool as long as we understand we are human beings on this earth who are more royal than we know, and that we can choose maybe a little differently.
It's so interesting that your response to that quote, because as you were speaking, I immediately began to think of just the life of Zora Neale Hurston, right? One of the namesakes of our organization, and how she was relentless in her work, whether as an anthropologist like you, Dr. Love, or writing fiction, or writing plays with Langston Hughes. It was always centering this Black experience. And we know her story, where she ultimately passed away in an unmarked grave, buried in an unmarked grave, with really her legacy not being well retained and upheld until Alice Walker displayed interest in her and bringing her back to our line of vision in the 80s. And so when we think of this perseverance, we do have a model of that. We've seen that, right? And I find it particularly interesting with, are you all familiar with the NAP ministry, and the younger generation really upholding this notion of rest, of mental wellness? And I'm wondering, do you think that when we think of social responsibility and our responsibility as writers, as literary artists, are there some sacrifices that we must make in reference to our wellness, whether it's our mental wellness, our wholeness as humans? Or is that the piece that you're speaking to, Monifa, where it has to be something that's envisioned that doesn't exist yet? Your face looks like she did. Why you ask me all?
No, it's just that, we are extraordinary. There's just no question that we are here, halfway sane, and not killing all the white people is an amazing, amazing thing. So sometimes when we ask even more of ourselves, when we become the guardians of the universe with no Marvel story being told, I'm just thinking, we've been heroes for so long. Can we not rewrite the script a little bit so that we can balance being on duty and actually being all the way off duty for however long we need to be off duty? Our mental health, our physical health, I believe, rests on this, that at some point, we rethink our superpowers, and that we recognize we can do some things a little differently and bless each other more without having that expectation that, Black women can fly through the sky and they can lift up the world and they can do a million things. Yes, because we have. But I don't want my daughter or my granddaughters to feel they have to be on duty the way perhaps my mother or my grandmother was on duty. I hope they can discover another way to be both responsible socially and personally.
I would like at this time for, if there are, I have another question to ask, but I do want us to, I can't believe that we've already been on this conversation for a half hour, but I do want folks on the call in our audience, if you have questions for any of our panelists or general questions for everyone, if you can post them in the chat. And I do want us to consider and to think about this industry that we're in, literary arts and entertainment. I came across a 2020 article in the New York Times where Tracy Sherrod, who until this year, she was the editorial director at Amistad And she told the New York Times that at Amistad, I'm trying to feed our community by shining a spotlight on Black stories, Black culture, Black history. And because oftentimes what's in the headlines is not the full story of our humanity, what I think has changed or not changed in publishing is that there's more diversity in terms of what is being published in the African-American marketplace in terms of the variety of stories that are being told. But there's only like 7 of us Black editors who have some authority, real authority and power, and it's not full authority and power. And so I find that a particularly interesting comment because she works with, she's now with Hachette Book Group, an imprint with them, but she has been in the industry in a very visible way, in a very visible market, and had that to say. And so I'm thinking, when we talk about the social responsibility, do you think that we need to change the context in which we are considering how we're measuring success, how we're measuring impact as writers? Is there a different responsibility that we have when we're aspiring to be in a big publishing house versus doing community theater or community work, or where our work is more accessible and locally, but not necessarily on a national, international level? Does that responsibility shift as our impact broadens?
I want to think about that a little bit more, because I'm still thinking about a lot of what Dr. Love spoke about, and a lot about the quote. When we think about perseverance, it was something that came after that quote, after the word perseverance in that quote, to me, limited the scope of what Black women engaging in a kind of social practice are doing. It depends on what the goal is. The goal is liberation, then those traditional means of perseverance in a way of speaking back to racism directly and challenging racism directly and being a warrior at every interval may not be the desired outcome, because it keeps you in a reactionary mode. And I don't think any artist on this call or any writer or any story maker on this call intends to be reactionary exclusively in their work and predictable in their work, right?
May not intend to, but realistically, particularly if you're an agented writer, where there may be some requests made about what you write about. That's where my question then enters. When do we push back, or is our responsibility greater in instances where we have an agent? We now are with a big publishing house versus we're writing, we may be self-publishing, or we may be published to a
I have both of those things. And I think I'm kind of lucky because my agent is kind of a partner in this work. And if she ever suggests anything that I don't want to do, I can tell her that without threat of our relationship being different. My editor in my publishing house has never come directly to me about anything they would want me to write. And I don't know if my agent has stood in the wings of that and prevented that, but I haven't had that experience. And I'm unsure how often it may happen, but and I do agree that I'm very, 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 very lucky, blessed, guided, or what have you, that I have not had to adhere to large publishing industry standards as I envisioned I would. But that's not everybody's story.
Right. That's not everyone's reality. With Monifa, did you want to respond before we start taking questions?
I know, like Damaris, I'm still kind of stuck on that question from before, but because it was really something to think about.
Think
But
about, right.
um, Khadijah, let me just address the publishing and being at the whim of, I look at it, I guess, as being akin to being in corporate America, and quote unquote knowing your role,
Mhm.
knowing your place, where where an order of things is very important, right? SVP, VP, that's a big deal.
Mhm.
So I've been independent since day. I did a few inquiries. I have 4 books, 2 books of poetry, 1 book of short story, and a novel, and I self-published. I didn't have the patience to do query writing, and I didn't want to be told no.
Mhm.
So I'm like, I'll just do it myself, right? I'll just do it myself. Even with filmmaking, and I think what that does, I mean, it gives you a hardiness to because it gives you a hardiness, but it also gives you the autonomy to be confident in the way that you go, because that is what you decided. And when I think about Dr. Love and speaking, and I just kind of want to address her her question. I don't even know if I can call it a question about models, about the same old not working, and what we need to do to create the new narrative.
Mhm.
Um, in this country, which was founded with white males as the power structure, and mostly everything that has been done uh, to emulate that, we
Mhm.
as Black women, by our very nature, are not are against it, right? It's just not how we're built. So if we're looking to do something new, then we're the ones that we've been waiting for. We can establish that, and we have to sense the value in it, right? Because we've been so devalued, and it's absolutely possible, because before certain things existed, even with the Black poets, certain things didn't exist, and they became, in the Renaissance, it became a thing. So we too can become that thing, right? However it's defined and accepted, and then we change the narrative in that way. And when we think about being the tired, and Dr. Love, you mentioned that we should be able to kind of pick one another up, um, and how that looks, I'm not sure. But what I do know is that weariness is a real thing. What I do know, when I think about deer, they're constantly looking for the predator. If we're constantly in a state of being like deer, that's not sustainable. And it will impact us, and it will show itself in all kinds of ways that are sad, and certain maybe ways that we can't come back from. I remember Terry Williams, this amazing PR person. You all may be familiar with her. She wrote the book called Real Talk for When There's Nowhere to Go But Up. Black pain. It just looks like we're not hurting. And there were times she would tell me there were weeks she couldn't even get out of bed. And I had to think to myself, this woman who's had all these amazing clients is sad, you
Mhm.
know but we do have to be aware that we do need to know when to take 5, and to press reset, and to not feel guilty about taking that time to do so. So I just wanted to kind of throw that in, Khadijah, because it had been impressed upon my soul as well to kind of speak to it. But thank you for
And
that.
I think it's very important that we recognize that this responsibility, it has everything to do about caring for the communities that we represent, but also caring for ourselves, as you said, because how can we sustain, just like what they tell you on the airport, in an airplane, getting the mask for yourself before you extend it to someone else. But what I find particularly interesting, and what I see in conversation, or part of the conversation a lot, looking generationally at new and emerging writers versus many of us have been in academia or have been in just around for a long period of time. We know our history, we know precedents. Are writers who are writing in national publications, or writing pieces that have an international or national impact, but they don't have an understanding of history. They don't have a knowledge of people before, whether it's Zora Neale Hurston, or just this this landscape, this literary landscape that has existed that Tracy Sherrod speaks about. So when we talk about responsibility, of course, is that wellness and self-care, but what is the responsibility that we need to pay attention to, or that we need to acknowledge is our responsibility, whether it's about accuracy, whether it's about that pre-work, knowing what has come before? Do you have any particular ideas around how the damage that you believe may ensue when someone does not recognize the responsibility or certain responsibilities to the Black community in particular?
I don't know about the, did somebody else want to go? I'm sorry. I don't know about the damage, but what you're saying is making me think about something that I heard I believe it was in a documentary, While We Laugh, and it was talking about comedians, and they were talking about being what they quote unquote called like a coon, somebody that was kind of pandering to the white gaze or white supremacy or what have you. And they talked about it would always be high rewards for that person because it affirms some of the notions that continue to dehumanize Black people. I don't think that happens exclusively in comedy. But I also want to say that with that being said, a lot of people in my family are ministers, but I am not into the arts of conversion directly. I cannot tell someone to be a better artist and to love their culture and people and human beings and Black people more and better. I can't.
Say that again, the art of conversion.
Yeah, the art of conversion. I can't be that disciple.
Right.
Black writers to say this is what you must write about if I am invested philosophically in liberation in a human life that includes multiple choices. I just have to deal or tolerate or accept that posture, that cultural posture may not, or justice posture may not be present in their work, and accept it. And then I can either choose to, try to convert the person, argue against it, debate, or sit down and write some more pages about things that I love, which happen to be reflected in Black culture. And I also put a quote in the chat that I try to remember when I sit down to write, that Black literature is taught as sociology, right? Taught as social justice, taught as tolerance, but not as a rigorous art form. And what we haven't had a chance to talk about, I hope we can talk about later, are some of the concepts and ways that we think about Black culture when we're writing. I'm less concerned about those that are not doing it. I think they're not my business right now. It's not my business. I'm choosing love. If they're not choosing love, they're kind of outside of my purview right now.
Monifa, Monda, how do you respond to that? Preston Coleman's in the chat. Not my business! Exclamation point! Exclamation point! So you ignited some thinking around that. What, I have to say that everything that you're saying supports your original thesis, where we're not a monolith, right? And that you can't speak to all the experience of all Black girls, all Black people, because you're not all Black girls, all Black people. You're speaking from this experience that you know about. But, I know, so I'm a parent to a writer, to a Black writer who got into almost 20 colleges in her essays writing about how she wants to be in a writing program where she doesn't have to, and she wants to write, she wants to use new literary devices and have the freedom to write without having to talk about slavery, being a girl in the hood, or all of these stereotypical tropes that seem to, be what is always in the always getting some attention or publishing. And so I am curious, with this generation, and I've heard this, and I feel like a lot of the younger writers look at that being the things that we have focused on is the pain. We talk about the pain, the Black pain, and all of these things. But is it a responsibility for us maybe the responsibility is what you're saying, Damaris, to let people write and be free and don't judge and get out their business, right? But as teachers, as educators, do we have a responsibility otherwise? I want to jump into, that was rhetorical. I know y'all like, but I do want to look in the chat, and Corinna just posted, how do we get away from perpetuating trauma upon ourselves while writing about responding and reacting to Black pain we see in our communities and in the world?
I think about ego tripping. I turned myself into myself and was Jesus. So, part of that moving away from trauma porn and the like is recognizing that there's just all other kinds of ways to go about it. And if I could double back for a second, for me, living in the United States is impossible for my hands to be clean.
What does that mean?
Meaning, I don't make my own underwear. I don't make eyeglasses. I can't go to a Black person and buy a car that they made. In some way, my life is all bound up into capitalism, whether I like it or not. So, when we talk about others who make certain choices, sometimes we are not examining our own choices, what we buy and where we go and what we do and what we say. And it's like, it's a heck of a box here where you try not to contribute to anybody's exploitation. You kind of want your piece of the pie, so to speak. You want to do what you want to do when you want to do it. But all those things come with a price tag or a bill. So, when Damaris says not my business, it's really not, because I need to be worried about how wholesome my choices are on the regular. Whether, I understand I'm an educator as well. And please, you don't need to call me Dr. Love. Monifa's just fine. We don't need to be judging one another. We just need to be about what we can be about as consistently as we can be about it, with as much love as we can. And that's a real tall order, but it's the simplest thing that I can understand from week to week, year to year. The rest, either I start having highfalutin thoughts that, I'm the only one with the keys about the problems of Black people and what we need to do, or I get immobilized. So I'm right there with Damaris about, it's not my business because I have enough on my plate.
Monda, in your work, have you written anything in particular that has responded to this question or reflected upon this question of social responsibility, or just looking at the landscape in particular of Black writers and how we fit in as part of this industry? And I continuously say, this, where it's inequitable for Black women or for Black people, but knowing how hard it is to get your pieces, you responded, you said that you didn't have the patience, so you self-publish, you create and your films independently because you don't have the patience. Is there anything with this mindset that you've responded to through your art?
Not particularly that I can think of. I know I've gotten frustrated when I hear the comments, I don't have to vote, or, you know, because of the lack of education and because of the lack of understanding our history. I do get sad sometimes when I think about some in the younger generation who don't have any desire to learn more. And Damaris talked about being better and doing better. And to her point, is it about convert? To me, I don't look at it as I'm trying to convert someone. If I can educate them in a way that's not proselytizing, there's a saying that says, give the fish the food they want to eat. Mm-hmm. If I can present it in a way that is exciting to them, whether it be a graphic novel, if that's what they're into, or whether it be a film, a short film, a hip hop song, whatever the case may be, then perhaps I can reach them in that way. I mean, I do feel a certain responsibility to teach, because I do believe that people will act better if they know better. When our mothers and fathers went to school, they were in suits and dresses. What happened in a period of 30 years? And so, I mean, if you're in a suit and dress, you may not be as quick to go fisticuffs with someone because you don't want to get dirty, right? There was a certain pride that came with being Black that I have seen disintegrate from the time I was coming up to now, and I don't quite understand how that's happened. So in some way, I just I just want everyone to be happy, right, and all get along. But there is a science to this, and I think that because we are being attacked, we are consistently being attacked in ways that we probably don't know about because we don't know how to think that way. But we have to be on our alert. We have to. I believe that we have to figure out ways to get around all the shenanigans and make sure that our children are healthy and they're whole and they're happy. Because if you can't see what you want to be and you don't think it's possible, then how will we ever get there? So no, to answer your question directly, I haven't specifically written about it, but I am informed by it, if that helps.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Excuse me. Monda, I would really like to hear that George Floyd piece.
Okay. And I'll just read an excerpt of it because it's a little long. But when I get upset, Monifa talked about it. Nina Simone talked about it. When George Floyd happened, I didn't want to get out in the streets. I have a mother that lives with me. I was afraid of catching COVID, and I didn't know what was going to happen. So what I do is I write. And so I'm just going to share a little bit of it, and y'all can let me know what you think. Let me just find where I would start. Okay. This is a poem that I wrote in 2021. It's called I Can't Breathe, a modern day Black history lesson in memory of George Floyd. All right, I'll start here. You put lead in our water. We wade in the water. Faith beyond your cruelty, hope above your lies, even though we know that violence is as American as apple pie, that you're addicted to Black bodies swinging from southern trees, to Colin's public humiliation for taking a knee, for a just cause. Pause. With an economic noose tightened around our necks, get your knee off our necks. We are exhausted. We cannot breathe. But no matter what you do, we will not go gently with the breeze. We will continue to march in these streets, voices hoarse, getting blisters on our feet, staying the course to lift a 400-year oppression and replace it with a succession plan so we can breathe with policy fans and practice equality and humanity to the full extent of the law. Less. Look at this mess, reminiscent of 1968. Demonstrations rushing cities like a freight train to mitigate the pain. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Eric Garner chokehold. Body crumples and folds. No more breath. A senseless death like so many. Ahmaud Arbery out for a jog. Shot dead in the streets, an act you wouldn't perform with a dog. Dragging Michael Vick, you ain't slick. Distraction is your oldest trick. But back to Ahmaud's assassination, jogging alone down a Georgia street, nosing neighbors' fascination, and hateration, sideline benching, itching for a modern day lynching, captures the brutal death of a mother's son with a cell phone. Footage on repeat, can't wait for the fellas to see, sitting at home, popping lids off cold cans of beer, walking around privileged and free for a year without fear. Authorities ignore the gory, believe the contrived story on the surface until the video surface, prompting a trial. Forget bail. What the three of y'all did? What modern day guile? But now your butts are under the jail. You fumbled the ball. No video. Wouldn't have been a trial at all. Now you have all the time in the world to think about the racist epithets hurled faster than the bullets that caused a haunted human to drop and curl. You watched him writhe and crawl to an undignified street grave, after which I imagine you saved the damning video in a folder labeled faves. How dare you start all this mess? This white people foolishness. When England booted you and kept their best, you sailed for the U.S. amidst great hope to make a new home, a place you can call your own. Visions of church steeples, land you stole from indigenous peoples. You raped, pillaged, their land you cleared. You burned, you shot, leaving a trail of tears. You clustered native people on reservations without reservation. And I wonder how much you owe them in arrears, the original people in this nation. But somehow you had to build my country 'tis of thee. Sweet land of liberty, oh snap. Why not build on the backs of the enslaved? The new trade, their labor will be free. Ply them with religion so they'll behave. You went to another continent, traded your soul for black gold. This must be heaven sent. More black bodies you bring to work, reproduce, and bow to your will, numbing your ability to feel, because black people aren't really real, and owning slaves is your divine right. A myth you believe with all your might. Refuse to give up the fight with your political will on Capitol Hill. Slave codes, Reconstruction, black codes, Jim Crow, abductions, filibustering. You put up street lights to see the faces of the enslaved at night. Show me your papers then, because you don't think I'm free. Show me your license now. You match a description of someone who should be arrested. Pick one. It don't matter. You think we all look alike anyhow. Hands up, don't shoot. Legs apart, don't kick me with your boots. Orders barked, a scuffle, indiscernible sounds. A lock, a load, shots. My brother's on the ground. I can't breathe. As you tighten a rope around a proud neck, click clack, a modern day zip tie, this begins the collective cry, the oversized sighs, manifested fears, mother's tears drip over the memories of murdered children. I'll stop there.
So when did you write that?
So beautiful.
2021, October 2021.
So that was a lot.
I mean,
That was
7 pages. I got carried away.
But it sounds like it comes from a place of it's just a lot. Like you just were in this space where everything was coming out at once. And this is what you've been grappling with for a very long time. And you just reached a point where it had to come out onto the page. Mm-hmm. And I want to know, when, with feeling all of that and you bringing that up, how do you recover from that? Like, what is, that's a lot. That's a lot. You weren't just talking about last year or the year before. You were talking about a lot of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know if I do recover.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what my question is. What is the end of the sacrifice? When we even talk about responsibility, when does it end? And what is the cost? In the chat, you have Portia giving fist and first and foremost, snap, snap, snaps, powerful, incredible. Things that have continued since then, So it's 7:01. By no means was this conversation meant to be the finale or the answer to anything. But I think what we coming together and having this conversation has really unveiled, if it wasn't already obvious, is that these are the things that we're grappling with as writers. Someone had asked early in the chat, they had written about this commitment to, let me see, do you think it is necessary to commit to what we write, fiction, or nonfiction? And I feel like Damaris started answering that with sharing that she hasn't had to really have to compromise or push back against anyone trying to force her to write about something different. But this commitment, I found it interesting that Cheryl's asking this question because when you think of a commitment, you think of a responsibility that you have, right? Isn't that what commitment means? That you have a responsibility now, or a vow, or it's something that you're responsible for. So do you think that when we go into writing, that we have a responsibility, even if it's not to the world at large, but just to ourselves and to the words that we've written, the ideas that we've written down? And I'll give you context as I see your faces. I see you thinking about this. So I'm going to fill in the void while you all are thinking about it. I was touring one of my plays locally in libraries and schools, and I had profanity in my play, and I felt that it was appropriate, and I felt that it added to, this was what the character would do. She cusses like a sailor, right? And I was asked, this was before, could I amend the curse words? Because there might be some elderly people or some people who just don't like cussing. And can I make those changes? And it was funny because the character that was cussing like a sailor was an elderly person. And so I actually had a conversation with my cast, and I had folks that were like, no, this is your art. Don't change it. You have a responsibility. This is your voice. This is the first stop on our tour. You're going to change it after the first. So suppose the second stop, they ask you to change a little bit. So do we have a responsibility, even if we're not thinking so grand in terms of, as a Black writer, the impact of what we have on Black people, but just the responsibility that we have to our work in terms of keeping it whole and intact, from how we've conceived it, how we've created it, and how we want it to show up in the world?
I think that what you're talking about is like an intersection of like love, authenticity, and I like how you brought in the debate about like what happens when we're in a space with children, right? And then that is a very complex question, because what honesty do we owe children? Or should we be obliged to protect them from the negativity of the world? I think that's a question that every parent struggles with, and every caretaker struggles with.
Yes. I actually appreciate you bringing that up, because I feel like that's what I didn't add to me bringing up my daughter. It seems like, what was the point of bringing her up? But that's what I wonder, is that, does she now want to write about things that aren't about pain? Because I have blanketed her in that for the things that because I homeschooled her. So the things that I included in her book list, the things that I've introduced her to, is it like, damn, no more, so it's more of a respite. And I love that you even bring that up and you've articulated it as you have, because that is something. And actually we have a question or a statement regarding Ray Bolden says she noticed that in children's literature, specifically when Black children are protagonists, they're mostly centered or seen by white people from a deficit perspective, a deficit focus. And so I just, when you say, what is our responsibility to children? I feel like a lot of times that we do think that if we're doing anything that we know children are going to imbibe, and it has to be a lesson, it can't just be arts for art's sake. It has to be written with this message or this lesson involved. And do we have a responsibility when we know that the audience is going to include children? Corinna says, yes, agree about what stays on our minds, imprints on our psyche and hearts. Is that from your poem, Monda? Or is that something Damaris just said?
Damaris was
Yeah. What
yeah.
stays on our minds, imprints on our psyche and our hearts.
I mean, these kids today have, you talk about protecting them. They have so much access that we didn't have, just with the internet and being able to. I mean, they get wiser quicker, but they don't have the common sense, right? I mean, I think they're, they may learn about sex and the different types of sexuality and all this because it's at their fingertips, but they can't change a tire, a bicycle tire, and so I would say write your truth. Writing your truth. I mean, as someone who's spent a lifetime trying to please everybody and wondering, are they going to be offended by it? It will drive you nuts. If you write your truth, people know truth when they hear it. So write your truth and say it with your chest and be strong in it and be unapologetic. And I mean, of course, there are ratings for a reason, but I just stick to right because you're trying to protect them. They probably already know anyway, right?
Well,
to a certain extent.
I think that when we protect them, we have to also, we recognize that they see atrocity over and 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 over in a way we never did.
That's true.
So part of, they're probably full of tears because of the repetition of atrocities and violence. So yes, they may have seen it, but I think the question still lingers, how we don't add. Like when I was coming up, my grandmother and I would be shelling peas while she'd be telling me stories. Some of the stories were good stories, some of them were sad stories. But the context in which they were told was she was giving me love while we were doing what we were doing at the same time that she was sharing. So there was a pairing of storytelling and family history. And here we are together, being us, being real, working in love. So I'm not sure we can protect them. God knows I wish we could, but I think we can pair the stories we tell them better with acts of love so that it's just not a bombardment of things in social media, but, sit by me. I want to be with you. And when we're together, we can share this story.
Love, trust, honesty, transparency, telling our truth. Those are the themes and the things that I've heard you all share today. That really is what's within our control, which does not infringe on the liberty and freedom of other writers, allows others to write and to explore who they are as writers by also working on, as Monifa shared earlier, those things and those issues that you're sorting out and reflecting on about who you are as a writer. And so I think our listening audience today has posted comments and things that I think should be brought to fore into our attention. Joy says, when I was a child, I was drawn to read material that was similar to the life I was living. Yeah. As folks were telling Monda, powerful, giving you snaps. We also had Preston saying, not my business. I said that earlier. Again, Cheryl remarking on the art of conversion. I think that was something that was brought to the conversation today. I think we're going to take that away and steal that from you, Damaris. You need to trademark that. Joy says, persevere, create, honesty. Thank you for this quote. These are the keys to the way forward. And so in closing, Rhonda says, yes, I can agree with what has been said about the role we have played in the past and what is expected to us presently. So I think we don't really have a lot of questions because I think folks are, Kiki Petrozina says, and I wanted to read to escape and to dream. Yes. Kiki Petrozina is one of our instructors for this week's Writers Week at Howard. Good to see you, Kiki. So I think I think now's a good time to wind down because I feel like this was more reflective than I thought I think any of us really thought it was going to be. I appreciate it because this is that meaty kind of group talk that gets you to writing, right? That gets you to start thinking about who you are within this landscape of literary arts. I really want to, yeah, Damaris, it's a lot to think about. But I think that I would really appreciate and like for you all, as you think about this, I don't think the conversation should end. Hurston Wright is on Twitter. We're on Instagram. We are on Facebook. I'm going to actually start a hashtag. It's going to be called Black Writer Responsibility. I'm going to put it on the Hurston Wright Twitter page, and let's take the conversation there. If anything comes up and you want to tag us at Hurston Wright or use the hashtag Hurston Wright and continue this conversation, would love to know what some of your thoughts are that maybe you didn't get to express during this conversation. We kind of really unpack some heavy things. And I think that for the most part, because of our complexity and dimension as people, it's not going to be a cut and dry response to this activating question as to what our social responsibility is as Black writers. But I think that is a conversation that we can continue to have. So join us on Instagram or on Twitter, on Facebook. Thank you so much for being part of this Sunday conversation. We have another event coming up, a virtual event coming up this week with no other than Marita Golden, one of the co-founders of the Hurston Wright Foundation. Yes, and she will be doing a craft talk on memoir writing. And so we would love for you to come out to that. It's going to be, I forget the date. It is perhaps Wednesday. Let me not be trifling. Let me look and see right now. I should have it memorized, but I unfortunately do not.
Danielle said Wednesday.
Danielle is such a trooper. Lord have mercy. It is Wednesday. So I was correct. But Marita Golden is the co-founder of the Hurston Wright Foundation. She was the executive director for a while, but she is a multi-genre writer who has published more than 19 books. And her most recent book talks about this whole strong Black woman mythology and how that mythology impacted her health and just the stories of other women as well. And so she's going to be talking about memoir writing and during a craft talk this Wednesday. And I hope you can join us. Thank you so much for being part of this conversation today. And to learn more about us, you can visit hurstonwright.org. I'd like to thank our guests, Monda Raquel Webb, Monifa Love, and Damaris Hill. Thank you so much for being here. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Yay. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Love to everyone.